I was born in October 1929 on the Baltic shore. I was a little over 3 years old when Hitler rose to power. In January 1933, my only memory was of persecution. In 1935, I saw my grandparents, who lived in Berlin, for the very first time. My father, who was a doctor, left for England at the end of 1938, and from October of that year until June 1943, we lived in Berlin at my grandparents' house. All Jewish schools were closed in 1942, and I found work at the Jewish cemetery in Weissensee quarter, first as a gardener and then as a gravedigger. I was 13 years old when I was sent to Auschwitz with my mother, June 1943. It was there that a selection was made, those who lived for the moment and those who died. Because I looked older than my age, I was fortunate to be considered to work as a bricklayer. The serial number they assigned me was 17,003. And for the Nazis, from that moment on, I was no longer Thomas. Except for another boy, I was the youngest among 18,000 interns at Auschwitz. My mother was sent to Birkenau, where she worked at the Union factory. Unfortunately, she did not survive. After Auschwitz was evacuated, I was sent to Gross-Rosen, January 1945, and then to Buchenwald, where I was liberated on April 11, 1945. Before that day, I had never known freedom. For 4 years, I did not go to school. First of all, because the Jewish schools were closed, and then because I was confined. During my imprisonment, I wore a striped uniform. The letters that formed my alphabet were A as appeal, B as block, until Z, like Zom, known as high voltage barbed wire. Instead of reading, I learned and memorized maps of the camps. We were not permitted to take notes of anything. I was always alone at camp, without my parents, with few friends, as they disappeared into thin air, one after another.
Every morning became quickly at 5 o'clock in the morning. Just a few minutes to wash and eat a small ratio of assigned food. Then we marched to work, which was the site of the entrance of the camp. Work would make us free. At 7:30 p.m., after work, we would feel the suffering of a worn-out body, tired from hard work, but always ready to respond in an orderly fashion and punctuality at every roll call. During the daily roll call, we remained in a line at attention, while an official of SS counted us with a gloved hand while he reminded us of how total our non-existence for the SS was. When the count of the prisoners did not tally, which happened almost every week, the roll call recommenced and continued for hours, until late at night. What excited the Nazis was to see those human forms barely standing due to exhaustion, waiting for the commander's decision.
Music was a prisoner's best friend. When the camp orchestra began to play for the SS, we could hear the songs from both sides of the barbed wire fence. On one side was the military with their prestigious guests, wives, friends, and sons walking in the garden. On the other side, behind the electric barbed wire fence, were the curious prisoners, gathered together, moving on one foot to the other in order to see the event. The prisoners formed a crowd so thick that not even the SS could give heed, but even so, in a brief moment, the music was able to arise the differences existing between the two parties on the gathering.
Our only survivor was the lottery, but fortunate was against us. The SS had all the good cards, which were the dangers they continually threatened us with: the gas chamber and the incendiaries, sickness, the torture chamber and the bunker. One of the most feared moments by all was that of the selection. After the nightly roll call, all the camp had to march towards the grove, towards the central sauna. On one side there was the high-tension barbed wire, on the other the guards. To escape was out of the question. The morale was very low, as we waited for hours while our endless line entered into rooms for the medical visit. Some prayed, others thought about their home. Others had lost all hope of survival because their situation indicated no further possibility to be used. Some seemed indifferent to the destiny reserved for them, to be led to the death factory.
To find a bit of extra food was an obsession. We were surrounded by scrawny shadows because the prisoners were emaciated. Then potato peels, rotten cabbage recovered from kitchen trash cans, molded bread hidden by someone, raw food for animals found in horse throws. All this was a true banquet. When I was transferred to Buchenwald, we had to wait for long hours before having our soup, mostly water and 300 grams of bread a day. 4 times a week we expected 25 grams of margarine, twice a week 50 grams of marmalade, and on Sunday 50 grams of sausage. That made us stream for days and days. In the last day of camp life, however, not even the miserable ratios were distributed. Nothing was left.
It seemed that the external world continued to ignore us. We were brutally made to leave the camp of Auschwitz, to be thrown on other long and external evacuation trip to the death march, during which there was nothing else to eat.
On April 11, 1945, order evacuation was given to the Buchenwald camp. Tomas Geve is able to hide himself.
We waited without knowing what would have happened, but the tension was at its height. No one said a word. It was between 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Suddenly, cries were heard from the other side, with increasing deafening shrills. Our camp seemed inanimate, where someone screamed, "Watch out, the entrance." I raised my eyes and saw that the Nazi cross had disappeared, and now, in its place, something white was fluttering. It was finally the moment greatly awaited, that delicious moment of victory that our companions had waited for 4,453 days and nights for what had finally arrived.
Thomas was one of the 903 children and adolescents who left the Buchenwald concentration camp alive. Seriously weakened and run down because of malnutrition and hardship, remained in the shack, Block 29, for more than a month after the camp had been liberated.
It was then that he dedicated to make 79 miniature colored drawings to the sides of a postcard, using the revised side of SS form to illustrate to his father the real situation of concentration camp life.